Us right now is Laura Cathcart Robbins. She's the host of the Only One in the Room podcast. And she will be speaking with our panelists who all write about cultural experiences that have shaped and continue to shape their lives. And Laura actually was on the premise with me a couple of years ago when she first started, and she's so lovely. She has been on our advisory board and has been one of the people who like helps us be honest about storytelling. Do we have Laura on screen by chance? Is she here with us?
I am here. Yes. Hi.
Yay! Damn, girl, you look great.
Oh,
yeah,
thank
you look beautiful.
Thank you.
I love your step and repeat.
Yes. Yes. I love your hair as always.
Oh, thank you.
Yes. So happy to be here.
We're so glad you're here. Yeah, this is awesome. So as we said, Anastasia is here with us. Hi, Anastasia.
Hello.
Hi, Anastasia.
Hi. How are you,
Welcome.
Laura?
Welcome.
So glad to see you. It's always the day we actually come together at the festival is always so special because, we're talking to each other and sending emails back and forth, but it's just lovely to, even though it's on Zoom, it's lovely to actually put, see faces, and it's the next best thing to being there.
Indeed.
And are we going to bring in Tracy right now to talk about the festival? Book club? Awesome. This is a collaborative book club in partnership with Warwick's of La Jolla. Be sure to check out Warwick's again. That link will be in the comments too. Tracy J. Jones is coming on, and she is our book club moderator. She does an incredible job of welcoming our book club authors, and she asks such insightful questions that really bring to life the experience of reading these wonderful books. So Tracy, are you there?
I am. I'm right here.
Well, why don't you take us away? Take it away. Tell us about the festival, San Diego Writers Festival / Warwick's Book Club. I think I got that right.
Absolutely. Okay. I'm Tracy Jones. I am excited to be the moderator for the Writers Festival / Warwick's Book Club, along with my co-hosts, Haley Nicole and Lisa Churchville. Marnie and Jennifer launched the book club last August. Again, another thing that they added, but it's been so exciting to be a part of. They wanted to keep the Writers Festival community connected throughout the year. So we're so excited to be partnered with Warwick's. It's just been a beautiful relationship that we've developed, and to see the book club grow in popularity. And I think this book club is special because it's run by writers for writers. And that's kind of our differentiation with other book clubs. This month, we are reading the amazing Morningside Heights by Joshua Henkins. Again, it's Morningside Heights by Joshua Henkin. It was the #1 indie pick for June, which is big, one of 2021's most highly anticipated books from Newsweek, 38 novels you need to read this summer from LitHub, and also one of Alma's favorite books for summer 2021. There's still plenty of time to order your book from Warwick's and be ready for our meeting with the author on Monday, August 16th from 5 to 6 p.m. Pacific time. If you'd like to be part of the Zoom audience and get to ask our authors questions, which is like the best part of the book club, you can email me at tjjones1@gmail.com, and Haley should put my email in the link as well. But come join us. It's been such a great learning experience, and I can't believe we're celebrating almost a year anniversary.
No, it's crazy. It's crazy. I have heard such great things about this book, Morningside Heights. It's getting a lot of buzz. And the truth is there's so many amazing books to choose from. It's been great having Warwick's working with us, hasn't it, Tracy, to help us identify the great selections we've had so far.
Judy at Warwick's and the entire team, they're always like, you don't have to take this recommendation. And then we look at it, and Haley and Lisa and I read the reviews, and we're like, yes, we'll take that recommendation. That's awesome. So we're never pressured, but the recommendations have been so great. And it's such a nice club because we've done memoir, we've done fiction, and kind of a little bit for everyone. And this one's an interesting one because it's about Alzheimer's, telling it from different perspectives. And it's going to be a really good book club.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. And that brings us to our next panel, talking about great writers. All 4 of our panelists have books coming out in either 2020 or 2021. And it is our pleasure to welcome Anisha Bhatia, Gabriel Bump, Carlos de los Rios, Lindsey Salatka, and our talented moderator, Laura Cathcart Robbins. Laura is an author, freelance culture writer, and host of the popular podcast, The Only One in the Room. She has been active for many years as a speaker and school trustee and is credited for creating the Buckley School's nationally recognized Committee on Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. Her recent articles in HuffPost and The Temper on the subjects of race, recovery, and divorce have garnered her worldwide attention. She is a 2018 LA Moth Story Slam winner and currently sits on the advisory board for the San Diego Writers Festival, which we're so grateful for, and the Outliers HQ Podcast Festival. Laura is also a monthly contributor for The Tempest and a founding member of Moving Forwards, the first national memoirist collective of its kind. And we are so, so grateful to have Laura here today. This is going to be an amazing panel.
Absolutely.
Well,
Awesome. And
yeah.
I'm sorry, Anastasia, go on.
No, that's it. I was just going to say,
Okay.
I'm so looking forward to it. We've been planning that for months, and I'm just really looking forward to hearing from all of these authors.
I am too. And I want to remind everyone that we're going to leave some time for Q&A at the end. So if you have any questions, please drop them into the Facebook comments. As you have them, we'll be collecting them on our end and then bringing them back to Laura for the panelists at the end. So Laura, mwah, I love you. Thank you, girl. And I guess we'll drop off.
Oh, excellent.
You're on the
Thank
other
you
side.
guys so much. Thank you. What a lovely introduction. I love the San Diego Writers Festival, and I am very proud to be a member of the advisory board. It was one of my first one of the first things I was asked to join, and it is so dynamic and energetic, and you and Marnie are just, making things happen in a way that I don't see happening other places, and inspiring this love of books and authors and bringing people together. I want to thank you both so much for always doing that. And Anastasia, thank you. Lovely to meet you this year. All the team, thank you all for doing all of this work behind the scenes. I know how hard it is to put something, or not how hard, because I know it's a labor of love, but I know how much work it is to put something huge like this together and bring everybody in. And for me, it is an honor and a privilege. I'm so excited that you asked me to moderate this panel. This panel is so my jam. I'm a freelance culture writer. I love writing about culture. I love learning about different cultures. So it is, this is exactly what I would have asked to do if I had been given a choice. I'm going to introduce our panelists now. We have Anisha Bhatia. She was born and brought up in Mumbai, India. And Anisha now lives in San Diego, California with her husband and 2 children. She loves tea, biryani, books, and beaches, not necessarily in that order. And The Rules of Arrangement, which is an amazing title, is her first book. Then we have Gabriel Bump. And Gabriel grew up in South Shore, Chicago. He received his MFA in fiction from the University of Massachusetts Amherst. His debut novel, Everywhere You Don't Belong, was a New York Times notable book of 2020 and has won the Ernest J. Gaines Award for Literary Excellence, the Great Lakes Colleges Association New Writers Award for Fiction, the Heartland Booksellers Award for Fiction, and the Black Caucus of American Library Association's First Novelist Award. Bump teaches at University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. Now we have Carlos de los Rios. Carlos has written and published 6 books of prose and poetry. He is also a working filmmaker who has written and produced 7 acclaimed films for Academy Award winners Lauren Bacall, Harvey Fierstein, Academy Award nominee Elliot Gould, Emmy Award winners Johnny Galecki, Golden Globe nominee Hayden Panettiere, as well as movie stars such as Scott Eastwood, Texas Chainsaw 3D, Josh Hutcherson, Peta from the blockbuster hit The Hunger Games. Carlos has worked on more than 20 books, 30 films, and has written and or produced 7 films. Carlos lectures throughout California and is a sought-after script doctor, writing coach, and story consultant. Carlos's clients include top Hollywood screenwriters and New York Times best-selling authors. And now we have Lindsey Salatka. She is an author, editor, and ghostwriter. Her debut novel, Fish Heads and Duckskin, will be released by She Writes Press in just a few days on July 20th, 2021. Her writing has been featured in Shanghai Family Magazine, Urbanotomy, Shanghai, Blogger.com, and volumes 3 and 4 of Shaking the Tree Brazen short memoir. An essay she wrote won a coveted place in the San Diego Memoir Showcase in 2020. And she looks forward to her role as the director of the Kids Write Children's Writing Contest in 2021. So, wow, aren't I lucky to be able to moderate a panel with all of you? This is fantastic. Warm welcome to each of you. And I'd actually like to start out by asking a question for everyone. Among the 4 books that we're discussing, Everywhere You Don't Belong, Fish Heads and Duckskin, Kids in Cages, and The Rules of Arrangement, we have 3 novels, 1 book of poetry. Each one invites us into a different world and a different culture. Can you each just introduce yourselves and then tell me in a few words what your book is about? And Anisha, let's start with you.
Sure. Hi, everyone. It is lovely to be on this panel with all of you. My novel is called The Rules of Arrangement, and it is a comedy of manners, and it is set in Mumbai, India in present day. And it is a satirical take on Indian society's obsession with marriage.
Excellent, excellent. And then so Gabriel.
Hey everybody. So nice to see you all virtually. And Laura, thanks for hosting.
I'm having a little hard time hearing you.
What about now?
Let's see. Say one more thing.
Hello, hello, hello. Hello.
It's a little bit better. I don't know how it is for you guys. Can you guys hear him okay?
Yeah. A little lower though.
Yeah. Yeah, so maybe just to project as you're.
I can project.
Okay, excellent.
Well, thanks for hosting, Laura. Thanks for having all of us. Sorry for my microphone Zoom troubles. Here's my book, Everywhere You Don't Belong, and it's just a coming of age story about a young man from the south side of Chicago, and follows him through childhood up until when he goes to college and tries to figure out whether or not he wants to stay home and try and fix his community or venture out into the world and see what lies beyond the hills, I guess so to say.
Wonderful, wonderful. Lindsey, let's hear from you.
Okay. Hi, I'm Lindsey. Thank you so much for moderating and for having me today. My book is Fish Heads and Duckskin, and it is a comedic, heartfelt portrayal of an American woman's search for self in Shanghai.
Excellent, excellent. And Carlos. We can't hear you.
Is it, now can you hear me?
There we go. Yes.
Okay, sorry about that. Here's my book, Kids in Cages. It's a collection of poetry, but I would, I'd be careful using that word poetry. They're really short stories that are that cover a diversity of sort of Mexican American sort of stories. And as I was talking about with Robin, one of the main things I try to focus on in this book is writing non-traditional or sort of unexpected Mexican American characters, and not so much the gangsters, the vatos, the car thieves, the druggies, all the kind of things you're typically used to seeing from them, but a little more off the beaten path. So that's what I did in this book.
That's great. Thank you, Carlos. Okay, so again, I have a question for everyone, so I'll just call on you afterward. The question is, I want to hear about the responsibility that you take on as a writer when telling the story of a particular culture. And Lindsey, I'd actually like to start with you, as Fish Heads and Duckskin is the only book that's set in a culture that's different from your own.
That's a great question. I take I mean, it's a very serious responsibility. It's very, the sensitivity on speaking about cultures is heightened right now. So, I mean, which I think is a good thing, because we really have to think about what we're saying and what we're projecting into the world. So that will, I think, no matter where we land with the sensitivity that we're experiencing right now, I think that will stay. And I think that's a great thing. So I think the responsibility of speaking about culture is huge, because words are so important, and the impact that they have on the world is, I mean, we've seen what words can do, especially in the last couple of years, and it's incredible. So I think what we say matters more than it ever has, and that's a good thing.
Thank you for that. Gabriel, how about you? The responsibility that you take on as the writer when you're telling the story of a particular culture.
Yeah. And can everyone hear me? All right, I messed with my microphone a little bit. Okay, great. Well, I guess, like, while I was writing this book, I wasn't necessarily thinking of responsibility in that way. Like, I was just writing about my neighborhood, right? About the city that I loved, and wasn't even necessarily trying to be honest about it. Like, I was just trying to have fun in this setting that I didn't really see in fiction that often. But as I grew into the process, right, the publication process, where you're bringing it out into the world, right? You're showing it to editors, you're going through edits, and you're really trying to figure out what this book is about. Like, what is this book supposed to do in the world? And I think that the responsibility that I settled on was just trying to be, or placing, like, a real importance on just finding, I don't know, like, empathy everywhere, right? Like, trying to depict the world that I knew as I saw it, as, like, truthfully as possible, right? And I think that that kind of honest, I don't know, that honest, soulful point of view can lead to just cool things happening on the page, right?
Yeah, I agree. Thank you for that. Anisha, let's go to you.
Yes, for sure. It was a responsibility, and I still feel it, because as an immigrant, the country that I've settled in does not know as much about Indian culture as, say, for example, the UK, which we have a history with. So for me, the balance was how to, use how to be authentic and still sort of be able to simplify enough for a new audience to understand what was going on and to relate to it. And in the subsequent edits, I think it got difficult because there were questions being asked about, why is this important, or why does this have to be in here? So for me, it was like a delicate thing to be able to weave it into the narrative and not bore people with so much of exposition and culture. And I'm hoping I've done a decent job of it.
Yeah, that's really important. I'm so glad you brought that up. I enjoyed that when you and I talked earlier, you talking about that. Carlos, I want you to answer this question, but I have a piggyback question for you as well, because you touched on this in your intro, that I think, and tell me if I'm wrong, but around 95% of Kids in Cages is what I call the anti-stereotypical experience, meaning you're not writing about the Mexican American experience that we typically see depicted in books or on screen. So I'd love for you to talk about that, and if you felt any particular responsibility for writing about that piece of your culture.
Yeah, definitely you feel some responsibility, but I think the longer you write, again, I've been writing for a long time, and the longer you write, I think, at least I've come to settle into a place where the ultimate truth and good material comes from some sort of absolute truth, something that's just so real that it's true to you. And it's one thing to sit there and try to represent for all Mexican Americans, but that's just, and again, I'm Mexican American, I'm not Mexican. There's lots of great Mexican writers that are well established and well loved, both in cinema and in books. But there's not a lot of Mexican American poets that are widely read. So in a weird way, I didn't really feel like I was in any kind of competition with anyone. I didn't feel pressured that way. I felt that the thing to do was be true to myself in my observations of people, because I find people fascinating. I mean, I'm always, every time I go to the store, every time I go to the movie theater, every time I go out somewhere, someone's doing something really weird on the street there. I mean, there's just people that are just doing weird stuff, you know what I mean? All the time. And it makes you want to kind of peer behind that curtain a little to see what else are they doing, you know? What kind of weird relationships do these people have? You know, how do they treat their friends and their family members, you know, because that guy's weird, you know? So I felt that the real responsibility was to be true to myself, because then the material's real. I am Mexican American. So I think that true, that reality is more giving to the reader than if I was to try to manipulate the thing or try to explain my culture or try to, you know, take it on like some responsibility of some social import. I think telling small, true stories is a form of responsibility. Mm-hmm. And then, what was the other thing you were asking me? I'm sorry.
Oh, just about writing about the non-typical Mexican American experience.
Right. Yeah, I mean, because I did not grow up in the hood, as you would say. You know, I didn't grow up in a particularly poor neighborhood. I grew up in Northern California in a pretty white neighborhood, multicultural, but it was not Mexican heavy. Let's put it that way. English is my first language. I do speak Spanish, but English is my first language. And so my brother runs a biotech firm, and, you know, I write for Hollywood. And I was just trying to, it's like, where are those images? Where's the Mexican Americans like on screen or in book? Where's the guys that run biotech firms that have PhDs? Where's the guys who write movies that we watch? Where are these kind of characters, you know? And I'm like, in my life, that's normal. That's just, everyone I know is someone who's doing something interesting and not what you would think of when you get these depictions. So I think, once again, just to get right back to the point, yes, they're non-typical, but I think it's because maybe I'm a little bit non-typical of what you would expect. Like when you think Mexican American, you know, you think of cholos and vatos, and you think, oh, you know, stuff from Too Fast, Too Furious. They got to be like car tuners, you know what I mean? It's got, and I'm just like, well, not every Mexican American's like that.
Well, and when you and I talked, I had like this epiphany, because I had a really similar experience where I thought the way that I grew up was typical, and then come to see the depictions in the media of how other people that look like me grew up, and it was completely different. You know, in my neighborhood, which was a middle-class Black neighborhood in Massachusetts, that was all I knew. I didn't know anything else. So it felt very wrong to say that was typical when my experience was so much different. So I just really appreciated you talking about that.
Of course.
Anisha, I love that your protagonist in The Rules of Arrangement is a dark-skinned woman who is spunky and overweight. I think it's really important to explore standards of beauty in every culture, and like to see what they are, and know that, you know, the American standard beauty is just one of many, 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 many. And within that, there are so many other values assigned to different, you know, standards of beauty within the American standard of beauty in all these different cultures. Why did you choose to write about her in that way?
A bit of it is personal. I have always been chubby ever since I was, in my teens. And it's something that is, it's a universal thing that, thin is beautiful. And there is a certain value that is associated with someone who's tall, thin, and beautiful. Nothing against anybody who is tall, thin, and beautiful. It's wonderful. But back home, we sort of have a colonial hangover where the lighter skinned you are, the more you are valued in, the even marriage market, or even as a person. Somebody comes home and they're like, oh, she's so pretty, she's so fair, and she's so thin. These end up becoming your only things that people value you for. Where is the education? Where is the fact that you are a good, kind person? You're intelligent. All of these things sort of get shoved under the carpet. And just the beauty standard and just the way you look is sort of, kept on a pedestal. And it was very important for me to be able to write about that and show that you don't need all of these things to be happy. You are not, there are people who make you feel that you need something which you don't really need. And I just wanted to have like that divide, and that conditioning is really, really hard to get over. So that's how I wanted to just show it's slow, but it happens.
Yes, yes. And so important. And thank you for doing that.
Yes.
It's, and you and I had a long talk about caste and colorism and all of that. And I just don't think it's talked about enough. And I think the way to move forward is to see our heroes and heroines looking different and still being loved and lovable. You know what I mean? Looking different than that typical standard of beauty. So I just really appreciate that you did that and that you chose that path for her.
Thank you.
Gabriel, when we spoke about your coming of age novel, as you said, Everywhere You Don't Belong, you talked about writing about the culture of Black Chicago, which is different than the culture of white Chicago. But within that one culture, like we were just talking about, there are many other shades and layers. And you said that in your novel, you explore a world that's neither filled with extreme violence, nor is it like the Obama Chicago, that kind of Black royalty. I think I have that right. Is that right? Kind of.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I want to hear you talk about what that means. Can you describe that? And then also why it was important for you to write about that slice of your culture.
Yeah, so I guess like that kind of like similar to you, Laura, and I guess Carlos, you mentioned this too. Like it like is my culture, right? I grew up in this like Black kind of middle class neighborhood, right? Like in the South Side of Chicago. And I think when I started writing, like in college, like seriously, like started writing like short stories and thinking, hey, I kind of want to be a writer. The authors that I looked up to that like lived in Chicago and were writing Chicago stories were writing about white Chicago, right? Like people like Stuart Dybek, who I really love and I think is a brilliant author, right? But his stories don't have any Black people in them, very rarely. Like there are people just kind of coming on and off screen. Right. And like for me, I just saw Black people all the time, every day. And I just felt like our little slice of the city was interesting. And like, not just for like it being a Black neighborhood. Like I think South Shore is interesting and worthy of literature because like once you remove race dynamics from a segregated city like Chicago, like the book explores how class interacts in like kind of mono racial neighborhoods, right? Like South Shore is known for having really wide like income inequality, right? And I think that how that is explored like within the Black community, within like a subjugated community is really fascinating and interesting, right? And also the other thing is that like the main character, Claude, he's just like some dopey, moody little kid, right? And like, so how, like most kids, right, no matter where they're kind of from, And so how he internalizes and deals and like processes these like massive social things just spiraling around him, I also think is interesting, right? And that's also, that's me, that's my culture, right? It's like,
Yes.
you know, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I completely connect with that. And, you know, and I love the kind of like feckless, like main character who's just like, this is his world and he's in it.
Yeah.
But then you're also showing people from the outside who haven't had that experience, something that they may not ever known existed, right? That
Yeah.
there's, yeah. So,
and that's
yeah.
their loss, right? That's their loss for not thinking
Yeah.
that this interesting place exists, right? Like
Yes.
showing people what they're missing, I think is also worthwhile.
Well, and then when they read your book, they'll be exposed to that and they'll be like, hey, let's check out this South Shore in Chicago. See what's happening there. Miss Lindsey, hello.
Hi.
Hi. So as you mentioned earlier, well, you didn't mention this, but your book is loosely based on your experiences in Shanghai, right?
Yes.
And you wrote it in first person, so it feels very memoir-like.
It does. It reads like a memoir, yeah.
And we already touched on the fact that you were a white American woman writing a book that's set in a foreign country and culture, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when you and I talked, you said something that really struck me, and I'm going to read it to make sure I get it right. You said that you wanted to start these cultural conversations, even if it makes you the bad guy. So can you tell me about that? Because I was fascinated with that.
Well, I guess there's a chance that I will be seen as a bad guy because I am a white person writing about another culture. And what I've had many conversations about this. And honestly, it was terrifying to me and scary. Like, I thought maybe I don't want to do this. Maybe we could just pretend this didn't happen, like whoosh, pull it all back, make it go away. But then, you know, and also the conversations were like, well, no publicity is bad publicity. And, you know, so even if it's negative, it's like, well, that's okay because at least your name's out there. And so I really had to sit with that for a minute and you know, because I was like, that kind of made me cringe because I just feel like some part of that is what's wrong with the world right now, right? Like everybody just wants their name out there and doesn't really matter why, or, you know, like what happened to, you know, what you say matters, you know? And so I think that, that I finally came around to my feeling, which is that, you know, if I need to be the bad guy in order to elevate a conversation about culture and accepting and embracing cultures, then I'm okay with that. Because the whole point is, you know, I mean, for this book, it's about loving yourself, no matter where you are. But really, if it becomes about culture and it helps people talk about it and you know, be curious about it, then I think I feel good about that.
Yeah. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
I agree. And if you have not seen Lindsey's, what's the flash mob called that you do? You have to see it.
It's Ajima EXP.
Yes.
Yeah, you can find it on the web.
It is worth a search, believe me. It's hilarious. You're really funny. You know, you're a funny writer, you're funny in person, you're fun. And I think if that comes through in your book, then people will be, and I think it does from what I've heard of it. I haven't read it yet. But I think it comes through in your book. And I think that's really going to help people link to the culture especially from your perspective. You know, if there are other white women who are interested in seeing this culture through your eyes, you'll be able to lead them in there with this very kind of loving, fun way. So, yeah, I really appreciate that.
I hope so. Thank
And this is actually another question that I have for each of you that's going to kind of piggyback on that. So I'll just say from my own experience, I write a lot about race for the Huffington Post. I've written a bunch of articles for them. A lot of them have gone viral, and there are now a team of trolls that are dedicated to hating me. Once I publish, they're the first ones to respond. I don't even read the comments anymore. And they really mainly want to just argue that that's not right. Whatever my experience is, that's not correct. Has anyone ever objected to the way their culture was portrayed in your work? Has anyone said, no, that's not right, or no, you need to write about it this way, or no, that's just one experience? Have you come up against that? And Lindsey, I'll go back to you first to see.
Yeah.
Tell me about that.
It's so awful. It's, it's like, I guess that's the part that was so scary, because it's like the last thing that I intended was to, I guess, be culture bashing or culturally insensitive. And it's just where we are right now. And I think, like, as an author, it's so important to remember that, this is where we are, and it's because we're working through a lot, and this is where we belong, and we will end up somewhere that will be better. But I will say, there are trolls and haters everywhere. I really try not to read them, but sometimes I can't help it. But what I did to make myself feel better about it is I read the troll reviews on my favorite books, just so I knew that. I recommend that to anybody that gets something bad, because I just, when you look at what people can say about something that in my mind is perfect, and because not everybody's going to like everything, right? So
right.
That really helped me feel okay about it, because if they can say that about them, then they can say anything about me, and it's okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, culturally, I just want the result to be more conversations.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, the haters are the haters gonna hate.
That's right.
It's just what it is.
That's what they say.
Yeah.
Carlos, what about you? Because you're writing about what we talked about, not the typical Mexican American experience. Have you received any pushback from that ever?
Laurel, yeah, I mean, some. Although I would say more, I get a response like, well, that's really weird stuff. I get more of that than I get the cultural representation. Or did I do it right? Did I do it wrong? And I think that a lot of the, I mean, I'm 50, but I think the older generation, I think they don't read this kind of material. So I think the people that would probably dislike it and find it and truly find it like, well, that's not Mexican American. I think they don't read this kind of material. So I really haven't had too much pushback there. And I think the younger generation, these millennials, they have a much broader, that's one of the things I really like about this new group coming up, is they have a much broader sense of sort of American culture and sort of what's acceptable, and sort of, hanging out with different kinds of people of different cultures and stuff like that. I don't think they're as, closed-minded as necessarily as the older generation or even our generation, mine.
No, I agree. My kids are 23 and 21, and they have friends of all races, and they think it's completely fine if their friends use the N-word. And I'm like, no. And they're like, but Mom, everybody says it. It's not a big deal.
Oh boy.
And I know that's generational. And I'm just like, wow, not around me.
Right,
please.
Right.
Anisha, what about you?
Just going back to what Lindsey and Carlos said too, a couple of things. One, Goodreads is filled with lots of people with opinions. And I had a couple which were very interesting to me simply because one of them was like, oh, this is light, this is fluffy, this does not have seriousness in it. And it's like, I made it that way so that it talks about a serious topic without depressing people.
Mhm.
And sometimes and then there was another one who ended up throwing all of the isms at the book, it's this and it's that. And, it makes me think about what I call cancel culture,
Yes.
which is these things exist, like the things that we write about exist. And it is doing these great movements that have come out of these issues a great disservice if we do not continue the conversation. Because if without context, if you have like trolls or reviewers or bloggers or anybody coming and just shutting that conversation down, there is no chance of ever, making a change or making a difference. You're only entrenching that other person's deeper beliefs in what they're thinking. So you've just lost that chance to change.
Absolutely.
It's and I'm seeing that a lot, and I'm seeing that people talking about their experience as the only experience, and that's just so not true.
Yeah. And that and the cancel culture piece of that is, I think it's a really important point to bring up. Again, going back to my sons, we were talking about taking To Kill a Mockingbird out of curriculum as part of like the, looking at culture through a different lens, curriculum wise. And my son was like, I think we should keep books that are controversial now in there so we can discuss them and not just eliminate them, because then we don't have those conversations. I have very wise sons. Gabriel, let's go to you.
Oh, yeah. I mean, there's so much interesting stuff that everyone is saying that I want to respond to a lot. And I mean, I think like personally, I haven't received much like blowback. Like people have written horrible things on Goodreads about my book for a variety of reasons. Like I don't know if it's like people just being horrible on Goodreads right now. I don't necessarily read. And like so I guess I don't really pay attention to much of that, like when it's happening, and when we're talking just about the younger generation, and maybe even my generation too, kind of like mid millennials or whatever, is that there is this encouraging trend towards just like understanding no experience is monolithic, right? Like no race is a monolith, right? And I think that that's in and itself has changed. Like I remember I went to like Missouri for high school or for college for a couple of years, and it's in my book, like the narrator does. And like I remember just meeting these kids from like central Missouri that just assumed because I was from like Chicago that like I was in like a gang or something like that, right? Like just things like that are just, it's kind of like nonsense thinking, right? Like, and it's really kind of like low functioning brain activity yeah, I mean, but it's true, right? And so I feel like now that doesn't necessarily seem to be the case, and I think the reasons for that changing are like interesting and worth thinking about, like whether like it's representation in fiction, whether it's like Twitter like providing this access to like different stories or something like that. And so for me, I actually feel less pressure on like representing any broader truth besides like my own, right? Like I feel like just as an artist, that's kind of the most important thing.
Yeah. I love the nonsense thinking. That made me laugh. But I was thinking about, while you were talking, my boyfriend's white, and when he brought me home to meet his family, they had never had a Black person in their home before. So it was a real bridge. And I think that the way to really open people's minds is through love. Like, I love this person, so you need to be able to see them the way I see them. And I think the same with books. Like I understand and grow to love cultures through the books that I read. not necessarily by visiting the places, but if I didn't read certain books, I might not have an affinity for that culture that I've developed. And I that's what I thought I heard you talking about, is just like you can expand people that way. They can fall in love with your book.
Yeah, I mean, like, absolutely. Like, I guess there's like one quick example, like, I don't want to derail, but like at the moment I've become really obsessed with like translated Hungarian literature, like from like the 20th century to 21st. And like, I feel like my understanding of Hungary as a place, like currently, is this weird far right, like totally backwards political like country on the other side of the world, right?
Yes.
I feel like just reading through literature, I have a different like, I don't know, it's changed my perception of this place. It's really far away.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I mean, which is, I think, the most amazing thing about books is that you can travel the world without ever leaving your bedroom or your armchair or your porch swing, and experience all these things. Only you can't eat the food, which is like, if you could do that, you wouldn't have to go anywhere. We are getting some questions from the Facebook group. I have one more question before we close. And this is for all of you. I was really struck by talking to all of you. All of your books were years in the making. All of them were years in the making. I'm really curious about the process of getting it out into the world. We don't have time for all that, but I'm just really curious about it. But I want to know is, during the process of getting your books published, did you have to stand up or insist on keeping some of the language or the food or the dialect? Did you have to kind of fight for that, the own voice, to have that in there? And since I just stole your term, Anisha, I'm going to go to you next or first.
No, I didn't have to fight for all of that. But my book started as an own voices story. And that's how I pitched it to agents. And that's kind of how they pitched it to editors as well. So there wasn't much of a pushback, but it was just like the balance that I said, how much do I put in? Because I've had reviews, going back to what we were talking about, of like, oh, I don't understand anything about the book. I don't understand anything about the Indian culture, so I'm going to give you like 1 star or 2 star. And I can see where that comes from, because there's so many words which are, which is not in the vocabulary, in this region. But it was just the balance that was the tricky part of how do I explain and how much do I keep in. It was all from my side.
Right. And what about you, Carlos?
Once again, I think I have to just go to that place and say, I think the material is so, again, I'm just going to say weird, that I don't think editors knew too much what to say. That was, I tend to have 2 reactions, just, from people and getting it out there. And one reaction is people just put the book down. It's like too much. Like, no. And the other reaction is like, wow, what? So each reaction I get there's a sense of confusion, I think, in there. But I like that, because it's kind of like, I think, again, even though it's a collection of poems, and each poem should be able to stand on its own, I do think when you're reading them all, there is some kind of a collage that's made that does represent some kind of a voice, I guess I would say. And I hope that comes across. And that's what I do think that I tend to get. And so, no, I didn't get a lot of pushback about, keeping my particular language or this or that in there.
Well, I think confusion is provocative, though, right?
Yeah. If
they're confused, it's thought-provoking and they want to understand it better. So I think that's great.
Right. Yeah. And I think also the more of them you read, like I said, it does kind of add up to some kind of, you see a kind of a perspective on people and on the nature of observation of people. So if you're just to read one, I think you probably be, that's when you get the people who say, I don't get it. But if you read a bunch of them, then you kind of start to go, I see what's going on here. He's coming from an angle at he's looking at all the weird quirks of people, and he's not looking away. He's not flinching at it. He's looking at the bizarre behavior of people, not the good behavior necessarily, just the weird behavior.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Always consistently the weird behavior. Again and again and again and again, until eventually people go, I hammer them down and they're kind of like, okay.
But like you said before, it's really just weird to them. It's not necessarily weird, right?
I agree. And I think more than anything that I think with my stuff, I think it's not so much the specifics of the culture aspect, to be honest. I think they're just kind of like, who would write about this?
Right.
Why would you do this? It's kind of one of the reactions I get a lot of from people. They don't dislike it. They're just like, I don't get a lot of trolls or anything like that. I just get a lot of like, I don't get it. What's happening? You know, or I get a lot of like, that really hurt my head. I have a headache. I got a few people that have said stuff like, you can only read 2 or 3 of them at a time, and you got to put the book away. It's like you can't just sit there and just read it on and on. So I get a lot of that.
Okay. Lindsey, how about you?
I guess in the editing process, there's a lot of back and forth, and I had to cut a lot of things and explain a few things more deeply, or not explain, but just write more about certain things. And I think as an author, at least for me, in my experience, when I first started writing the book, I was a little more defensive about what I wanted to keep, because I felt like it was, like this is my baby. And now, I think I can tell when someone's feedback rings true. And I really work on, being open, and sometimes I might have to think about it for a couple of days, but I will, there is certain feedback that takes a minute to digest. But yeah, I think the longer I do this, the more I get better at, hearing what people are saying.
Well, that's good advice, to give yourself that time to metabolize the feedback before responding, right?
Right.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Yeah. And Gabriel.
I think like I was very fortunate, I think, to have an editor and an agent that were just really behind what I was trying to say, right? Whatever, like, not even like in terms of message, just like really behind the voice of the piece. And so the only pushback like I had is I had an old white character that would only speak in these kind of deranged monologues. She was an old, like a kind of grizzled old reporter, now running a newsroom at the college. And I had to cut about like 90% of the stuff that she said, like in the final edit, because some of it was like libelous, right? And like the publisher didn't want to like run afoul of anybody. But I did manage to fight and keep the scene where she does mushrooms with Donald Rumsfeld in so I think that's that's the only time I feel like I had to put my foot down for something, probably misguided. No, but like, and I think just in all these conversations, it's really important to like surround yourself with people that like care about you, right? Like because, right, as much as often as you can, I mean, sometimes it's hard, right? But if you luck into finding a group of people that you feel really like support and understand what you're trying to do, and feel like they can kind of take a step back and don't have to kind of control everything you're saying, those are the kind of people you want to make art with, I think.
That's great. I love that. And that scene, the mushroom scene with Donald Rumsfeld, is Definitely worth the price of admission.
Yeah.
You gotta read that scene. All right, I'm heading over to our Facebook questions. We have lots of them. Thank you, everybody who's asking. So the first one, let's see. Do you feel like there are certain topics that are taboo right now? And I'll just leave that for anyone to jump in, if anyone wants to jump in with that.
I might just add something to it, and that's something going back to an interesting review that I had. I have a little section in my in one of the chapters where, and my main character's name is Zoya, which is a Muslim name, and she is predominantly in a Hindu culture. And when she has someone coming to like see her for, marrying her to their son, they are like super religious, and then they come in and they're like, oh, she has a Muslim name. And to even say that right now, you get this thing thrown at you. Oh, it's Islamophobic, it's this or that. But these things are true, and they still happen, and they happen everywhere. And it's kind of like a taboo to not show you these things. But if we don't show them these things, how will they ever change?
Mm-hmm.
So it's just a little thing that I read. And when I read the review, I was like, why would you stop someone from showing you what is happening for you to change it? So that was very interesting to me.
Yes. I like that a lot. I think that's a really good answer. Does anybody else?
I would like to say that what I wish was taboo is misinformation, but it's not, and that's a shame. But I would love for the problems that we're having because of misinformation. I would love for those to go away somehow.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I feel like it's hard to make anything taboo, because then we're stopping a conversation that needs to continue so we can land somewhere better. So yeah, that's my taboo wish.
I forgot to mention that question came from Sarah. Thank you, Sarah, for that question. Nina is asking, and this is for all of you, what are your thoughts on sensitivity readers? Did any of you have sensitivity readers?
I had a couple.
And what are your thoughts, Lindsey?
Well, I guess I would just like any beta reader to be aware and sensitive. My concern with sensitivity readers is that they're coming to the game already sensitive, and so it just feels and I don't, I worry that it will shut people down, and what we want to do is, like I've said, is elevate and continue the conversation. So I don't know. I feel like that's part of where we are, and I hope that goes into a place where it just makes a lot of sense, but doesn't close people and make people scared to talk.
Yeah. Did anybody else have a sensitivity reader?
I had one, and it was interesting because there are certain words or phrases, and it was a nice learning experience because the way they explained how a certain phrase or a word can be considered sort of like othering, which it was a good learning experience. It wasn't something that was sorely needed for the book, but it made me aware of how a reader would perceive certain words associated with a character in the book. So it was, it wasn't all bad. So
yeah. Okay. Carlos or Gabriel, did either of you have them? Have you worked with one?
No, I haven't actually.
No, I didn't either. No.
Okay.
No,
I did want to say back
Yeah.
on that last question about I don't think any topic is taboo. That's just me. That's just where I come from. I don't think anything's off limits. It's just how you approach it. But I don't think any topic's off limits.
That's great.
Well, and I guess like, because I was thinking about this too, like I just feel like there's always stuff that is considered taboo. Like Ulysses was a banned book. Like Ulysses wasn't able to
Right.
be printed.
Yes.
And like I also think that like what people mean when they say like something is off limits or like taboo or like cancel culture is run amok is like what they're actually saying is that people are just being mean to them on Twitter, I guess. Like it's something like I've noticed, which like in the severity of that I think like varies. But yeah, just like write whatever you want, right? Like people kind of have the right beyond like real genuine meanness to just respond to it however they want to. So
yeah, thank you for that. All right, let's see. Rick is asking, this is also for everyone. Rick says, I'm a white male who grew up in South Central Los Angeles. Many of my characters, and he says parenthetically, I write mysteries, are Black and Latino. I'm nervous to write about my experience because I feel like there will be backlash. So who wants to go first with that one? Lindsey.
I mean, I would say there will be backlash. And that's because of where we are. So, I mean, if you're worried that it's going to happen, I think you just have to accept that it will. And I think, I mean, with the goal being that the conversation can continue and, you know, and you shouldn't, I mean, I don't think you should be scared of it. I just think you should be aware that it will happen. And where do you want to lead that conversation? Where do you want that to go? So that's kind of what you should put in your mind.
Mm. And Gabriel and Carlos, I'm curious, as Black and Latino writers, how do you feel personally about being written about your culture being written about by white people of the dominant culture?
Well, I don't really care. I think that because I like don't have to like read the book. Like Rick, I think that, you know, I look forward to seeing what you like produce or anything like that. I mean, just last night I just finished a book by Larry Brown, who's a tremendous like Southern writer who died like too young, I think like 15 years ago or so. And his first novel, and this is maybe like we're talking about in some way, like with this kind of appropriation thing. His first novel is about one black and one white, like Vietnam vets in a VA hospital, like dealing with their trauma and overcoming it. And half of the book is told from the point of view of the black, like Vietnam vet, right? Like I'm talking about his culture, like talking about his visions. And I read it in like 2 sittings and I loved it. And like Larry Brown is a white guy that grew up in rural Mississippi, right? And I think that that we shouldn't like just limit ourselves, I guess, like arbitrarily. But of course, I've seen other races dealt with like poorly by white writers, and I don't feel much of a need to consume that media, I guess. Like if it's done poorly, like I won't read it. Like I won't watch it. Like that's kind of.
Yeah. And Carlos?
Yeah, I feel the same way about that, and just that kind of sense of like, you don't have to read the book, you know. Like if you're sensing racist portrayals or stereotypical portrayals, and the same goes for a movie, you don't have to finish the film. The minute you catch that wind of like, you know, this is offensive, or this person doesn't know what they're talking about. You know, if I catch that wind in a movie or a book, I just put it down. It's like, there's too many good movies to go watch. There's too many good books to go read. So when I start catching that, when I catch some of that wind, but again, you have to be careful because sometimes really smart writers will offend you on purpose early in a piece, only to pull the rug out from under you and kind of shift the view. So you got to be careful to just not be like, just because you read one bit of dialogue or one scene that looks like, hey, that's kind of a racist portrayal. You might find later that the writer's actually very smart and was trying to rile you up, and is going to. But the conclusion of the whole, I mean, when it's all said and done, you will not feel the piece is racist. That they actually have done something quite marvelous, in fact, and they've like I said, riled you up to the point that your fur's up, and then they start telling that different side of the story, and it's kind of like, oh, I see why they did why they did. So you got, it's a really delicate thing there. If you can't just, go on one scene, you gotta, give people a chance.
Yeah. I'm sure you're one of those really smart writers, right?
I don't know about that. I think crazy.
I bet you are.
Crazy, but we'll see. I don't know. I the jury's still out.
Okay. And Anisha, did you have any thoughts on that?
No, I mean, just to add to that, everybody has to write their truth. And like Carlos said, if you find something offensive, you always have the option as an adult to put that down and walk away. And, it may be offensive to you in a certain way, but then if it's needed for the narrative, we can't just, be offended with little bits and pieces of a book. You have to step back and look at it and then decide. And if it's still offensive to you, put it down and don't recommend it to others.
Yeah. Jennifer, are you here because we're at time?
I'm here because I'm just joining you, but I don't want to slow you down, or I don't want to stop you. This has just been so incredible.
Oh, do we have time for more questions, or do we need to wrap it up?
We're pretty close to being able to wrap it up. Do you want to ask one more? If we can all keep short answers? Okay, let's do one more.
And just really quickly, Rick, it sounds like Lindsey saying be prepared for backlash, and everybody else seems to be saying if you write about your own experience, then that's your experience, and people are either going to like it or they're not. So don't be nervous. No, you can be nervous.
I'd like to comment on that actually before, Joe Aday, who is one of our favorite writers, and he wrote the IQ series. He is an Asian man who wrote about a Black detective in East LA. His books are fantastic. He grew up in East LA. He knew these guys, like he's writing characters that he knows. So I think that's the thing, is like, you got to know who you're writing. So it's authentic, right? If you've lived that experience, that's why we write these things, because we've experienced it. So I just wanted to drop that in there.
Yeah. Thank you for that. I'm really interested in his book too.
So good.
Yeah.
He's such a good writer. Yeah.
Okay. So the last question to wrap it up briefly will be, when writing about your own culture, or even when writing about your own culture, do you feel like you have to have a disclaimer at the beginning that this is your own unique experience? And let's see, Anisha, let's start with you.
I'm not sure how to answer that, but there are many, like for me, writing about my own culture, I think I'm able to diss it a lot more than I would if I were writing about something else. So that's like a plus point that I have. But no, it's not a disclaimer. It's just, it's so difficult to answer that. No, I wouldn't say that. It's just the responsibility rests with me, and to do it as entertainingly and as truthfully as I can.
Mm. Did any of the other three, Lindsey, Carlos, or Gabriel, did you feel like you needed to do that at the beginning to disclaim?
I did actually do that. I don't know that I would call it a disclaimer. It's an author's note. Basically, it's just describe or saying that, my experience is, or the novel is based on my experience, loosely based on my experience living in Shanghai. So this did come from, my experience, not just from my imagination.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm very, very, very against disclaimers. In fact, I'm strongly opposed to them. That's the one thing I find taboo. is when you disclaim your writing or try to couch it. In fact, in my book, 95% of the poems have no titles. I don't like titles even. Titles to me are a form of a disclaimer. They're giving away the secret of what things. I just like people to hit the ground running and just like you're in the story without even knowing what the name of the story is. Nothing. You don't know. It's a new character. It's not been on any other pages before. It's just So again, I think that's one of the ways you can prove I'm definitely anti-disclaimer.
Love it.
Awesome.
Gabriel, did you have?
Well,
Yeah, no, nothing.
Okay.
Nothing. I don't think they're necessary.
Wonderful. Well, I just want to thank everybody from Facebook who asked questions of our panel. Thank you so much for them. I'm sorry if I didn't get to all of them. Thank you, beautiful writers. I will be looking forward to reading each of your books, and thank you to the San Diego Writers Festival. And I will turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Laura.
oh,
Thanks, everybody.
thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you
thanks,
all
gang.
for being here.